So, what does it actually mean to live a fruitful life? It's a big question, right? Well, today we're diving into a really powerful sermon from Pastor Nargis Nazir. She uses this one incredible metaphor, a vineyard, to break it all down for us. And everything, I mean everything in this sermon really hangs on this one single verse. It sets up this beautiful, simple analogy. You've got a vine, a gardener, and the branches. So let's unpack that. What does each part actually stand for? Okay, so to really get what Pastor Nazir is talking about, we've got to understand who's who in this vineyard. You can think of it like the key that unlocks the whole message, right? It's how we're going to figure out what a spiritually fruitful life is supposed to look like, according to this teaching. All right, first up, we have the vine. In this metaphor, the vine is Jesus Christ. The sermon makes it super clear that the vine is the source, the only source of life and spiritual energy. The whole idea is really simple. If you're not connected to it, well, nothing else can grow, period. Next, we've got the gardener, and the gardener is identified as God the Father. Now, this is not a hands-off job, not at all. The gardener is actively out there cultivating. The sermon explains that the gardener actually prunes the branches, cuts them back. But here's the thing, it's not to hurt them, it's to make them produce even more fruit. So that pruning, it's a metaphor for the challenges we face in life, which are seen here as chances to actually strengthen our faith. And that brings us to the last piece of the puzzle. The branches. And guess who the branches are? That's us, believers. According to the sermon, a branch has pretty much one main job. Just stay connected to the vine. Because that connection, it's the only way it can do the very thing it was made for, which is to bear fruit. Okay, but what happens if that connection gets broken? The sermon definitely doesn't pull any punches here. It paints a pretty stark picture of what happens when a life is cut off from its source. And the imagery used is, wow, it's powerful. A branch that's cut off from the vine just can't make it. It withers, it dries up, and in the end, it's gathered up and burned. And of course, this isn't just a gardening lesson, right? It's a powerful metaphor for a spiritual life that has lost its connection, its energy, and really, its whole purpose. So this huge contrast between being connected and being disconnected, it sets the stage for the sermon's central conflict. And that is the internal battle between what the teaching calls the flesh and the spirit. And here, the choice is laid out plain as day. On one side, you have the works of the flesh, things like immorality, anger, jealousy. Pastor Nazir actually tells this story about a man who was miraculously healed, but then went right back to drinking. Just a really clear, tangible example of choosing that path. But then on the other side, you have the complete opposite, the fruit of the Spirit, which is described as a direct result of staying plugged into the vine. So, okay, if the works of the flesh are what you're supposed to avoid, then what's the goal? What are you aiming for? Well, the sermon is very clear about the desired outcome. It's a set of 9 specific characteristics, and together they're called the fruit of the Spirit. And yeah, the sermon is super specific here. There are exactly 9 of them. This isn't some fuzzy idea of just, being a good person. It's a concrete list of qualities that are meant to be the tangible, visible proof of a life that's connected to the Spirit. So here they are, the list. Just take a look at these qualities for a second. The sermon frames these not as personality traits, things you're just born with. No, they're seen as virtues that you have to actively work on and cultivate. It's almost like a spiritual checklist for a life that's truly connected to the vine. But out of all 9 of these, one is lifted up as the most important of all. Love. It's called the foundational virtue, the new commandment. And the thinking goes, if you can get love right, the other 8 fruits will just naturally start to grow from that.
All right, so how does this all wrap up? Where does this leave us? The sermon brings it all home with a very direct call to action.
And the big takeaway here is that spiritual fruitfulness isn't a passive thing. It's not something that just happens to you. It's a series of conscious, active choices. It's about choosing to stay connected, choosing the path of the Spirit over the flesh, and actively, intentionally cultivating these 9 virtues until you become what the sermon calls a recognizable disciple. And really, this is the core idea of the entire sermon boiled down. It's actually pretty simple. Your actions, your character, the fruits that people can see in your life, these are the ultimate evidence of what's going on inside spiritually. They're the proof that you're genuinely connected to the vine.
And all of this leaves us with the sermon's central challenge. It's a question not just for the original audience, but really for anyone thinking about these ideas. It kind of shifts away from just theology and asks for a moment of honest self-reflection. When you look at your own life, what are your fruits? And what do they say about your connection?